In today's thrift store challenge, we are headed off to Target to look at the Hearth and Hand line, as well as the Magnolia website to get loads of inspiration for spring. And then we are headed off to the thrift store to see what we can come up with for a whole lot less. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. One item I pretty much never pass up at any thrift store are wood rounds. So I ended up finding this one for just $3 at the Hartville thrift shop, and there are so many different things that you can do with these. You can turn these into bookends, you can turn them into floating shelves, you can even turn them into a rustic stool. I've done a similar project to this in the past using a metal base, but this time I wanted to really lean into that rusticity and make it an all wood project. Taking 4 of these wooden dowels from the Dollar Tree, you could of course go to the hardware store, but then you would have to cut them, and I thought that they were already the perfect height, so this would make this a very easy and straightforward project. A lot of the inspirations I was looking at had the legs just ever so slightly at an angle, not exactly straight up and down. So I just used this wood block that was cut at an angle to serve as my guide so that all of the legs would be just ever so slightly angled out at the exact same angle. For reference, I'm using a 3/4 of an inch drill bit to drill these holes, also making sure to stop drilling at the same point so that way the legs wouldn't be wobbly and everything was nice and level. Rather than stain, I'm going to use this antiquing wax, and this wax is really forgiving. You usually don't even need to use pre-stain in order to get a really uniform color. So once I get the color applied, I do like to then take a dry paper towel and just wipe off whatever excess is left. After I sanded the top down and applied a watered down mixture on top of the wood round, it was just time now to assemble it. Because this stool is primarily just more decorative and not something that anyone's really going to be sitting down on, I thought that wood glue would be a nice way to attach the legs so that way you wouldn't see any screws in from the top, but it would still be secure enough to display some decorative items. Rustic stools that look similar to these can oftentimes be quite expensive, and I was able to achieve this look for under $10. I know it can be so tempting to buy all of the new little decorative accents every time Hearth and Hand drops a new line through Target. And sometimes I cave, like for example, I bought this piece here because I felt there would be really no way for me to make it myself. And sometimes you can find the pieces from the Hearth and Hand line through Target that are discounted, but there's still more than I'm really willing to pay if I feel I can make something similar myself. A comment that I get quite often from you guys is that your thrift stores just really don't look like mine does, and that you can't find some of this stuff, you can't source it. So at the Dollar Tree, you can find the same kind of fluted little vases, grab some florals, and you can make something really similar to what you see at Hearth and Hand for about $2.50. This is definitely one decor item through the Hearth and Hand line that I feel is a bit overpriced, especially knowing you can find it so much more affordably elsewhere. Or even I saw these little letter organizers. You could just simply grab a few of these. If you don't like the color gold, just spray paint it, attach it with some brackets to wood, and it would look super similar. I also really loved these magnifying glasses, but they were $20, and I thought I could come up with something a little bit more affordable, so I grabbed one of the magnifying glasses from the Dollar Tree. I popped the glass out because I knew I would be spray painting it, and I'm going to use one of the bases of these, just breaking the top candle part out, and then I'm going to widen that hole with some needle nose pliers so that way I can attach these two pieces together. And to make sure it stays really nice and put, I just used some E6000 and super glue gel. I used a combination of paints that I already had on hand of gold and black until I got this kind of aged look that you'll see quite often in Hearth and Hand decor. This project only cost me about $3 because I had all of the other supplies on hand, and I think you get an overall pretty similar look. Another piece that definitely seems to be a fan favorite from this latest drop were these candle holders. And while I think they're beautiful, I think you can still find really similar things at the thrift store that actually don't need any DIY required. I ended up finding this one at the thrift store, just simply removed the glass, and I think that you get an overall similar effect to this one at Target. If I were to buy this candle holder, the magnifying glass, and the fluted little floral arrangement, this would be over $50. Comparing those to what I made and thrifted, I ended up only spending about $7, and I think you get an overall similar effect. One decor item that I had been considering buying for a while now was this plant hanger from Magnolia, and I really like that the plant is just kind of suspended there and it's at eye level. But for $120, I thought eventually I would find something at a thrift store that I could maybe come up with something similar. So I ended up finding this piece here. I'm not exactly sure what this is supposed to be used for. It might be a plant hanger as well. I couldn't get past that kind of embellishment at the top, so I used my hacksaw to remove it. And when I was able to bend it off, some of the metal was sticking up, so I just grabbed my pliers and just pushed everything back down. But I needed to figure out a way to give this some height because it was quite short. So I contemplated using a lamp base for this, but I wasn't finding exactly what I was looking for. So I ended up just using this curtain pole here, just unscrewing the top and the bottom, so then that way I would have a nice metal secure piece to connect everything together. Although everything was pretty tight, I did want to add some E6000 to both the base and the top just to make sure that everything was going to be nice and secure. For paint, the first thing I did is I went in with a multi-textured spray paint to give it a more iron-like look, and then I went in with a self-etching primer and then finished it off with a high performance enamel paint in matte black. I also added a wider base just to give it more stability. Altogether, this plant stand cost me about $12 because I had all of the spray paints on hand from other projects, and I think I get an overall pretty similar look. As spring is rolling around, I really like to keep my eyes out at Target for really beautiful and aesthetic planters that aren't super expensive. I also just like to look on the Magnolia website to see if there's a constant kind of theme. And one theme you'll see quite often is there's kind of this like ruffled or scalloped quality to a lot of the tops of the planters. So I ended up finding this one from the Goodwill for just $5. Spray painted it with some chalk style spray paint. That is only to kind of cut down on the amount of plaster I would have to use to cover up that red and brown tone. Taking a damp paper towel and just kind of blotting the plaster just to give it some added texture. Then I went in with, again, some antiquing wax, and I'm just going to kind of blend that all around this planter. But if you don't have antiquing wax, there are so many things you can use, like gel stain. I've seen people use nutmeg and cinnamon, dirt from outside. There's a variety of ways, but the main factor that you're trying to achieve is to get that kind of distressed look. Once the plaster was dried, I went in with an ultra matte taupe spray paint that I had and then sanded it down. Still didn't love how it looked, so I went in with a couple of different paints that I had and just applied that with a brush, and then just kind of blended that together with a paper towel to again just give it an overall aged look. As spring is around the corner, I decided to place this faux potted lavender plant that I picked up at the Goodwill bins and then topped it off with some Spanish moss. A faux potted lavender plant in an aged pot can be oftentimes quite expensive, and I was able to create this for just about $8. Next up, let's talk about some wall decor options. Lots of sketches with Hearth in Hand and Magnolia, and one hack I like to use is if I have a large scale frame and I don't have a large scale picture, because that is oftentimes kind of hard to find even at a thrift store. So one thing I like to do is just take poster board. You can either use it as a mat or you can use it as a backdrop like I'm showing you here. And then that way you can lay your smaller scale artwork in front of it, and it just serves as a more aesthetic thing to look at besides cardboard behind it. So I just measured it, cut it down to size. I'm going to use that sketchbook that I've showed you guys so many times that I picked up from the thrift store for just $1. And I'm going to just kind of do a raw, like a rough edge around 2 of these sketches, and I'm going to secure these down with some washi tape. When it comes to timeless artwork, I always feel like sketches and photographs will just really never go out of style, and you can create these so affordably if you just shop secondhand and do a little bit of it yourself. And last but not least, some of you might remember when I had made these kind of like wall hooks in my kitchen, and I had used them to display different cutting boards and hanging plants. But after we decided to install that peg rail in my entryway from my garage, it just felt like there was like a lot of hooks happening in the kitchen. So I wanted to repurpose what I had made by turning it into a blanket ladder. Some of you might remember when I found that huge bag of brass curtain rings for just 50 cents, and it also had the hooks that the rod would sit inside of. So I just decided in order for it to be a blanket ladder, it had to kind of sit a little bit away from the wall. So I just decided to put those hooks on either side of the top, so then that way that would give me a little bit of depth to actually hang a blanket. And that really wraps it up for today, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments which project or find was your favorite, and I will see you guys next time. Bye for now.